Hello and welcome to another video. As you can see, I've managed to paint the wall behind me instead of a curtain. I don't know if it looks anything different, but you know, I got a little bit of money from YouTube for the last few videos, so I thought I'd spend it on some paint. I've had this for ages and I'll make those anyway. But today's video is about Bleeding Hart Yard in London, more like Holborn area, and St Katharines Dock. Now, St Katharines Dock I find a very interesting location anyway, but we're going to start off with Bleeding Hart Yard. Now, unusually, what I'm going to do here is shout out to another YouTube channel called Rob's London, because years ago I heard about Bleeding Hart Yard and I knew the story, but I was looking at Rob's London video just before I've done this, and I find the guy fascinating. His passion for the history of London is brilliant. So watch my video, then check out Rob's London's videos, and I'll stick his link down in the description. Bleeding Hart Yard is just off of Hatton Gardens. As you come up through Saffron Hill, it's just a little alleyway off of there. Now, funny enough, I used to work at Saffron Hill and did pop into Bleeding Hart Yard many years ago. My aunt and uncle had a graphic studio in Saffron Hill, and so we used to walk around there for lunch, and yeah, it's just a very interesting area. I did not know how old and historic that site was. So Bleeding Hart Yard, we visit there late of an evening, and it definitely has a creepy feeling about it. Now, the myth about, and it is a myth, of Bleeding Hart Yard, that Elizabeth Hatton, her body was found in the yard. Now, it's believed that she'd done a deal with a devil, and she didn't stick to that deal, and the devil come down and tore her limb from limb, and the name Bleeding Hart Yard comes from her heart left there bleeding and still pumping at the time. That is one, and it is only one of the myths that are around this on how the yard actually got its name. Elizabeth Hatton is said to haunt the yard area, but doing the digging over the years on this area, I also know about other spirits and people that may not have left there. Now, on the corner of Bleeding Hart Yard, you've got the pub The Bleeding Hart. Now, originally that was under a different name, and that seems to have changed it, that the sign on there was of a heart with daggers going through it. Now, there's a lot of rumours why the yard's called the Bleeding Hart. One of those was it was a site where goats used to be slaughtered, which probably credible. And as I say, Rob's London picks up on that as well. And that is what I found when I was going back to some of the old press reports and some of the old historic documents. It's sort of more referred to that than the myth. Now, the myth is actually in there, and one reports that it was Elizabeth Hatton. We know that she died on that date, 27th of January 1646, but at a house elsewhere. Going back through the history, and what I've been trying to do is dig up records of deaths in that area, and there is a lot. Now, as you walk into Bleeding Hart Yard, you go down a narrow passage, and then it opens up to the yard area. Now, it is very creepy. The cobbles are still there. You get a real sense of old London. Now, what you don't see is the older buildings. Now, back in the 1600s, those buildings were more slums. And going forward up until the 1800s, they were more like slums. And in fact, this is where Charles Dickens actually got inspired to write Little Dorrit. And Little Dorrit, Bleeding Hart Yard, appears in the book Little Dorrit. On a side note, in Saffron Hill is where, in Oliver Twist, Fagin is actually based. So where his workshop was. Yeah, funny enough, I used to work in Saffron Hill with my aunt and uncle, and my cousin worked there as well. I'm not saying it's a workshop, but we all used to work there together for a short time before I come out and worked elsewhere. But during the time that Charles Dickens was there, the houses were overcrowded. There were up to 12 families in one building, and the children were often left to fend for themselves and put into child labour. This adds some credibility to the stories that late at night you can hear children crying and sobbing. A few years ago, one of the restaurant owners around the corner claimed that he once followed a really scruffy young boy down the lane, walked straight across the yard and through the wall at the end of the yard. Now, again, lots of stories like this around the area. People do report feeling very, very suppressed and quite down when they're in that yard area. And it does have, I guess I was there late at night, and it has got quite a creepy feeling. Now there's a bistro in the corner, and it looks really nice, and everyone there was so nice and polite and everything. But you've got the gate to the crypt on the other side, so you go behind there and there's a church behind it, and you can walk down there. We didn't go down that way, it was locked up when we went there that night. But it has this, it's very enclosed and overlooked, so everything feels very suppressed there anyway. But one of the reports I did find was from Claire Sovereign. Now Claire Sovereign used to live in Kent, and she used to travel up every day to work in Saffron Hill. Her journey to work and home from work would take her past the turning of Bleading Hart Yard. And now one night in December, she is walking down the road, and I completely forget the name of the road, that's why I'm saying the road, because I can't remember it. I know you've got Kirby Street just off of it, or Kirby Road just up, but she walked past the turning for the yard and caught a glimpse of a young child. Now the young child, she said, only looks about 3 or 4. This was about 6 o'clock at night, and she wondered what a young child was doing around this area. Now London is mainly offices and office buildings right now. She followed the child down the alleyway. As she got to the end of the alleyway, it opens up into the yard area. The child went off to the right hand side, so she turned to see where the child was, where she see a lady with a shawl all over her shoulders, crouching down talking to the child. She thought, oh, it must be her mother, and she went up there and she went, oh sorry, I was just checking he was okay. The woman looks up to her, and instantly they both disappeared. Now she said that it was quite a misty day, but it wasn't sort of like they disappeared into the fog. She said they just disappeared in front of her eyes. She was quite shocked and taken back. She turned around, and at the same time there's a gentleman coming out of one of the doors of the flats that people do live above, and she come down and went, I think I just seen a ghost over there. He turned around and says, well, this is meant to be a haunted area. That inspired her to go away and do some of her own research on Bleading Hart Yard herself, and done a little article that was put around in a local newspaper. Now I believe this was probably in the Metro, because the Metro was the most popular at the time. I've gone back, I'm trying to find it, and I literally can't find it anywhere. I actually found this report on a photocopy I took of some old ghost stories of London years ago. So I think around about 2007 I went through, and I was going to do a lot of videos back then on London ghosts, and I did end up doing it, but a lot of my photocopies and notes were still there. I think we'd just done Absolute Radio, we'd done Golden Square, and we'd been live on the radio all that night doing investigation with them, and I think that inspired me to research more of the London ghost stories, and I come across this one, but I can't find the original article that I believe was in the Metro, and I will keep looking, because I'm sure there's more details in that than just a bit of the copy that I got. So one of the other reports we have is from a cafe worker, and I'm not sure if this is the cafe that is there at the moment, but it was a cafe worker who turned around and said that when they were clearing up of the night time, they would constantly hear a sobbing in the centre of the courtyard. So he said one evening after closing, they were sweeping outside the back of their doorway, and they could hear sobbing coming from the centre of the courtyard. Now there was no one around there at the time, and they were the only person standing there. She walked out into the centre of the courtyard, and she said the sound was sort of like echoing around the walls. This is something that has been reported before. Now some people think it's the ghost of Elizabeth or the ghost of the children. Now you can remember that this area was so run down that I guess it has that, as I said before, the suppressed feeling that you get in that area. And the history does, it has, this goes back to that thing about imprinting again. So if you get that feeling where something has happened and it leaves an imprint on that time zone, I think it can be picked up under the right conditions. It can sort of like replay itself again, the stone tape theory. So if you've got that, a very desolate area. Maybe that feeling still remains years later, but as I say myself, I do find it quite a unnerving place to walk into, but mainly because you're going down a dead end, and if anything happens and they're behind you, you're in trouble, aren't you? You can't get out. Now, Charles Dickens describes it as a really run down area. Here's a thing that keeps coming up about Charles Dickens. Everywhere I've gone, you've got Fobbing, you've got Charles Dickens and the shipping cottages where his family went to own it, Gravesend, East Tilbury, St Katharines Dock, that's come up in a minute, Bleeding Hart Yard, and it just seems that Charles Dickens is everywhere. Now, he either was on like this massive long pub crawl doing all these pubs and inns, or that he was very, very well travelled to know all these sort of areas and people to say that he was a regular there. But all these locations are used in Charles Dickens' books. One of the other reports we have from Bleeding Hart Yard is the sound of chains being dragged across the cobbles. Again, this is quite a common thing when you talk about these old yards, about chains noises or barrels being rolled over them. As I say, it's one of those typical ghost story event that people hear. I don't doubt it. Again, this is going back to that stone tape theory about under right conditions atmosphere can replay itself. But to sum up Bleeding Hart Yard, yes, it's got a very creepy feeling about it of a night time. I remember going down there during the daytime when I was working, and it felt depressing, and I still think it feels like that today. It's got these myths of Elizabeth Hatton that being unalived there. I know there are other stories that people say that it was a different lady and given a different time period for it. I say trying to find the amount of deaths in that area is really difficult, so there's just a lot of them. The area itself used to be old houses before it got redeveloped, and I mean, you can look at it, it's still old, it's still over 100 odd years old, those buildings around it. But if you imagine the slums that used to be there, going right back to the 15th century, that's a farmyard area there. We don't know what happened on that site before that. But again, could that be the idea of Bleeding Hart Yard when the goats were slaughtered there? Maybe it was something to do with where the slaughterhouse was for that farm. We don't know. The evidence hasn't really survived to say what that truly was, how it got its name. A lot of people take guesses, and a lot of those guesses probably are close to the mark. I say we don't know. I really would like to encourage you to go and have a look for yourself there. Parking of an evening, go down Kirby Street, you can park up there for free if you're lucky to get one of the spots, and just have a walk down there and see what you think. And have a chat with some of the restaurant owners there and the inn. Have a chat at the inn. They've got loads of stories themselves about stuff that goes on around there. Again, the inn's old, it's changed its name over the years. I know that an old barmaid there has reported items moving off the bars and a lady walking through the bar late at night. Again, so typical ghost story events for an old inn, an old pub. But again, yeah, so go and check that one out. Moving on to St Katharines Dock. So St Katharines Dock, or St Katharines by the Tower, was a medieval hospital and religious community that was on that site originally, and that started at 1147, so we're talking a very long time ago. That stayed in situ until 1825, when the hospital was relocated to Regent's Park because they wanted to turn that area into St Katharines Dock. Now, the hospital itself was meant to have not a dark history, but it had a history that may explain some of the sightings that we do get in St Katharines Dock today. St Katharines Dock never managed to become this really mega popular dock. Some of the berths there were too tight, so you couldn't get the really big ships down there. So it was mainly used for galleons and sailing ships. And today you've got a lot of London barges that do park up down there, and a few super yachts, but not the massive Russian one that's further down the road. So the docks finally opened in 1828, and right away it seems that it had a bit of a curse on the land. A lot of accidents happened during the construction of the docks, and a few people drowned while they were building it. But the workers at the time reported that a black shape seemed to curse the area. Now, when I say black shape, we have a description of a black fog that would move across some of the bays while they were being constructed. And if people see that, they see them almost like an omen of death. And they would say that they were cursed, they go back to their families, and their families would say that they'd come home from work and they were fearful of their lives, and some of them never actually went back to that job. Now, bear in mind, these date periods, leaving your job back then wasn't as easy as what people can do now. That was their livelihood, and they may struggle to get another job, but they're so fearful of this curse that was going around that they wouldn't go back. Now, curses and all that around that time, I should have looked up when the Egyptian tombs were found, tombs of Tutankhamun, because that would explain why people were fearful of curses, if that was in the news around that time with Howard Carter and all that stuff coming out. I have a look up at that, and I'm probably way off the mark, but I'd just like to see if there was a common trait or a common story about curses that could have triggered people thinking about this at this location, because it's easy to jump to conclusions. What people did say back then was the sound of crying people. Now, quite often workers would say that from the middle of nowhere on their construction site, they could hear the sound of people crying. Now, keeping in mind that this was a medieval hospital, there's probably thousands of people that passed away there. So people who believe that they can speak to people that passed away often say when they walk through St Katharines Dock, they feel numbers of souls walking through them as they walk around the edge. I questioned one of these people many years ago about what do they mean by this at St Katharines Dock. And they said as soon as they walk into the dock area from Tower Hill, they will feel a sense of presence of a lot of people that have passed on that are waiting to be moved on to their afterlife because they felt trapped in that area. Is this because this used to be a religious community and that area has been relocated to Regent's Park and they've been trapped there? I don't know if there was a graveyard on that site. I believe that the church was further back, St Katharines Church was further back from there, but it leaves something open to question, and it may explain some of the things that have happened recently as well. So over the history of St Katharines Docks, there is a large number of bodies being found washed up around the shores or in the dock itself. Now this is on the bank of the Thames, and you can look through it. One day there's 3 people that were washed up dead along the side of St Katharines Dock, and you have a little area there that is called the Alderman Stairs. Now I didn't actually visit the Alderman Stairs when we were there, we come in a different area. The Alderman Stairs are said to be a cursed stairway. Now they are known as the Pearson Stairs as well. Now this is where Lady Pearson was meant to fell down the stairs. We've got a lot of reports. Now people to this day say that if they walk down the Alderman Stairs, they feel as if they're being pushed down, or they lose their balance. Now they're called the slippery stairs as well. It does look daunting. They are steep, and I've been there many years ago. I do know that if you stand there and the tide is up with the water going past, it can feel a bit like, I tell you what it reminds me of, when you're at a fun fair and you walk through that tunnel and the tunnel's spinning, you lose your balance. That's what it feels like when you're walking down those steps and the tide is going past. It makes you feel a bit wobbly. That is my belief of why so many people fall down the stairs. Despite that, people say they feel pushed, and the amount of people that have fallen down those stairs to the deaths is very high. And so again, they believe to be a cursed stairway. That said, and in 2022, a lady came out of her house who turned around and said that she see a lady all hunched over with a big sheet over her shoulders and a rucksack on her back. Now she was heading towards the stairs, and the lady thought she looked pretty much out of character, and she followed around there, being a bit nosy, and she admits she was a nosy lady. She walked around to see what she was doing. The lady walked down to the stairs, and as she got to the bottom, she disappeared. You always hear this, disappeared. I wish there was a different word to say disappeared, but she disappeared before she got to the bottom of the stairs. The lady straight away said, I've seen a ghost. She went back, told her other half, I've seen a ghost. He laughed, as we normally get in these sort of stories. But again, other people have backed this up. Saying they've seen this lady walk down these Alderman stairs and disappear. Going back round the corner to St Katharines Dock, what we have is very similar story. Apparently, if you come in over the bridgeway, that is where the gates are that lowers and raises the tide in dock. A lady is seen walking along that pathway, again with a sheet over her shoulders and a sack, walking across the pathway. That pathway would have led to where you go out to the Alderman stairs if all the redevelopments hadn't been done. So you're looking pre-1825, before the hospital was shut. Could this be the ghost of someone that lost their life on those stairs back then? Now, I know that ships had sunk in the area and we had rescues, bodies were brought up on that shore as well. Could it have something to do with that? That shoreline does tend to get a lot of bodies washed up because of the way that the Thames flows around that corner. Now, I remember visiting St Katharines Dock as a kid. My dad actually painted one of the boats that's still there today, and I'm going to drop a photo in of my dad sitting on one of the boats that he had just painted. But we went down there and it was a very wet day, and every time I've been back to St Katharines Dock, I feel a little bit depressed. Now, I don't know if that's because my dad passed away a few years ago, 24 years ago now, and it made me remind me of my dad. But it was a good time. But I do remember being on that day and it was wet and we all got soaked and I was a bit miserable as a young kid going around there, but still being in awe of this dockyard. And I think the Royal Mint was at the side, and now you've got a Tower Bridge that goes up on the other side, and the Tower of London. You're right in the heart of London. As a kid, it's all those things you see on Mary Poppins and the Disney movies at the time. But yeah, I do think it has a little bit of a depressing feeling about it. Walking around there with my wife the other day, it had a really creepy feeling about it. You are sort of walking around these narrow pathways and your imagination probably can get away with you. But I actually got the creeps. There's one point where I walked around this wall area and it was very, very quiet. And I could just hear sort of like this rippling in the water. And it just gave me the shivers. And that don't really often happen in the haunted places I go to, meant to be haunted places. I've been to some of the most haunted places in the country, and I don't really get the creeps. If my mind plays tricks on me, I can kick them out. But I did get the jitters walking around St Katharines Dock. I won't. Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. As you walk around the other side, you get to where the King's Barge, the Royal Barge is. Now, this is what the royal family would use to go down the Thames. But where that is moored is also where people reported hearing someone struggling for their life in the water. Now, we have two gentlemen that said they were jogging along through St Katharines Dock, and they could hear this splashing sound. And they looked over, there was a gentleman in the water that was fighting for his life to get out. They grabbed one of the life buoys that are around the side and they threw it in, and the gentleman, despite having the life buoy right in front of them, ignored it and carried on splashing and again shouting for help. They're shouting down to him, grab the ring, and he didn't acknowledge them. And he put his hand up as if he was going to grab the ring and then just sunk down below the water. They instantly phoned the police. One of them jumped into St Katharines Dock and couldn't find nothing. And despite the Coast Guard coming out, I've been saying Ghost Guard. Despite the Coast Guard coming out and going down there themselves and trying to search it, and they lowered the water in St Katharines Dock, they did not find anything there. Not long after, 2 weeks to the day, again, the joggers were jogging along and they heard the same sound again. Again, they run over to the railings and it was a complete replay of what they see before. This time they knew what it was, and there was a ghost of a gentleman that had drowned in that spot. After talking to a few people, they found out that again this was something that people had reported, not particularly in that spot but around the dock area. Now I'm just going to quickly talk about the Dickens Inn. The Dickens Inn, where it sits today, isn't its original location. It actually sat more towards the northeast of St Katharines Dock, but they wanted to build some houses there, so they actually relocated the inn and moved it over. Now some of the timbers and most of the front is the original building, and they took that and used it to reconstruct it. What we have is where those houses now sit, people who live in those houses, not recently but over the last 10 years, have reported the smell of tobacco smoke and the feeling of someone sitting in their living room. Now the tobacco smoke they describe as really thick and dense. Now could this be a spirit from where the pub used to be? We do have some tales from where the Dickens is now. Some of the barmaids they report, again, the normal standard thing, pints flying off the decanters. They also report the ghost of an elderly sailor that comes up to the doorway, stands at the doorway, turns and walks away. So one of the barmaids said that when she was closing up the Dickens, that she went up to the doors and she was about to shut them, and she see this elderly gentleman walking up the stairs. She describes him as very, very pale face, big white hair. When I was reading the description, it reminded me of Uncle Albert, and the one where he runs away from home and goes down to Tobacco Dock. It's that sort of description of when you think of an old sailor, but I believe that she was more describing like a Victorian sailor, an older dress type sailor. He was walking up the steps. She turned around and said, "Oh, sorry sir, we're closing." He completely blanked her and again reached to about 2 steps before her, stood there, turned around and then walked back. She said as he got to the bottom step, he sort of faded. Now he didn't disappear completely. She said she could follow him walking away down towards what she said would be the dock area, down to St Katharines Dock, before he actually completely disappeared. This would be, again, if you take that as face value, you can place him after 1825 because the area wasn't a dockyard then. So if this is a spirit, it's somebody that passed away, or maybe comes back to visit the area because it's something he loved, but it happened after 1825 once it was reopened. Now it wouldn't be a good ghost story if we don't talk about the Lady in Black. The Lady in Black is said to be seen walking from Tower Bridge through the streets under to where you come out into St Katharines Dock. What we have here is a long list of reports of this Lady in Black. Now we have a string of reports of this Lady in Black walking from underneath the pathway of Tower Bridge into St Katharines Dock. And when she's seen, she's said to be seen in a full black dress, almost like a mourning dress with a black veil over her face. And when people have seen her and have approached her, she not disappears, she seems to speed very, very quickly into like a vaporized mist. So yeah, disappearing, but not just like that. She's sort of like fading out in front of them. What I find quite strange about this, that everyone describes the same thing. I can't find any proper record of this anywhere, apart from when you go onto things like the Paranormal database, or you go to American websites where they talk about it, and it intrigues me that so many people have seen this. When you talk to people around the area, they know of it, and people have come into the Dickens and saying they've seen it. People who used to work at the Mint said they've seen it. People who work at the Tower of London say they've seen it. Again, so we've got this repeated ghost that we can't actually track down properly because the reports of it are not being documented. We've only got what I call the modern hearsay, which makes me a bit jittery about this report. Is it an internet myth? Has this been started by maybe someone looking it up once and other people making videos on it? Like, look what I'm doing now. But I'm telling you, I'm doubting the story. So it seems to have been spread that way. then when you look at other side, there being maybe more foundation to it, the people who have worked at the Tower of London that I probably would trust more because they put doubt on some of the ghost stories in the tower themselves. They've said they've seen this lady, so they'll be finishing their job at the Tower of London. Instead of going up to the Traitors Gate or the other pubs, they go over to the Dickens. And they've said if they've walked through that pathway, heading over to St Katharines Dock, they have seen this lady in front of them and they've followed her through that pathway, and then she disappears before she gets to the dockyard itself. That I had a bit more credibility to. It's a proper person telling the story. They're open about it. They offer up other people that have seen it with them to back up their story. It's not just something I've seen on the Paranormal database or that other people in America have seen and copied their story of. Now, St Katharines Dock does give you that creepy feeling. At the night time, it's very, very colourful, all the lights around there, but it does have that eerie, old, almost abandoned feeling to it. Now, during the day, it's very, very busy with tourists, but of an evening, it can feel very, very lonely walking around there. Unfortunately, the area of St Katharines Dock hasn't escaped crime. Now, over the years, there's been a number of people found deceased there by other means than drowning. Have been arrested and charged for those crimes. One of the earliest spots where this happened was in 1947, and that would be if you enter the docks from the other side, from the east entrance, and you walk in fire that way. So you go past the Dickens first. As you walk around by the back of the Dickens, in 1947, a man was bludgeoned to death just behind the pub. His spirit is said to haunt that area. I can't find any real details about that, although on some of the books of the old East End of London of Now and Then, that shows you different pictures of how London was before and after. There's some details about crime. It lists about Jack the Ripper in there as well. Apparently this one came up in a TV documentary on the ghosts of East London. Now this was quite... Now I take this one not, I guess, with a pinch of salt again, because this was a TV show and they may embellish things for entertainment purposes, we say, if you know what I mean. That this person is said to haunt where his place of death was, and people have reported that the reenactment of his death takes place. They hear this blood-curdling scream and a mist around the area where he passed away. Again, I can't find no independent reports on this, so I'm only basing it on that TV show that listed it. But St Katharines Dock is well worth a visit, and I think to get the full effect of St Katharines Dock, I know that things aren't open, but walking around there of an evening is definitely an experience, and it definitely gives you a more feel for the spooky side of London. And take a check out that footpath that goes underneath the Tower Bridge, because yeah, it's maybe one of the more credible sightings that we have around there. But yeah, it's a nice place. It's nice. I find it a little bit depressing. You may not do. You may really, really enjoy it. But thank you for watching these videos, and again, thank you for all the comments and descriptions and people putting notifications on. Again, I'm going to try and keep up these videos. I've got a few more coming up, not just about London. I was going to do the Highgate Cemetery, and I think I will still do Highgate Cemetery, but you're not allowed to film there for anything spooky or to do with paranormal or the undead. So going there to film is pretty pointless. They won't give me a permit, because you've got to have a permit to film in there, or even to take photos. So I may do it using stock images, because I've got some really good, interesting stories about Highgate Cemetery that I'd like to share with you. Some of them you're going to know, some you won't. If I can get a gentleman to record a bit for me of his speech about his experience there, I'll put that in it. If not, I'll have to repeat myself what he said. Anyway, thank you for watching the videos, and I'll see you soon. Bye.